Here today to talk about improving gender diversity in STEM fields. And there are two important contexts in which we ask this question. One is a context of social justice. Is it the case that young women want to go into these fields but are somehow impeded? The other context is social enhancement. Will enhanced diversity lift the quality of the work being done by making better use of human capital? Will it create the conditions to enjoy the benefits of diversity in the workplace? Simplifying these two perspectives, sometimes we say that there are only two reasons to make an investment in improving gender diversity. One is that it's the right thing to do, and the other is that it's the smart thing to do. When we have awareness of these 2 points for our context, there are three important steps to be taken in our quest for improving gender diversity in STEM fields. The first step is to know where we are. The second step is to know why you want to be somewhere else. And the third step is to find the way to get there. When you can answer why you want to get somewhere else, you can count on the creativity of your colleagues to figure out how. When the why is clear, the how works out. If we all want to get somewhere else, we can. And if it's a bit difficult along the way, just remember that a prerequisite for motion is friction. Being confident of the facts, the first point I mentioned, is necessary so we can really know where we actually are. And we've heard both already this morning and yesterday many numbers about the situation in Korea. It's very important to know those numbers, but it's also important to know experiences and to have that knowledge not only through stories, but especially through hard research. There are many different kinds of research that could be done here to increase your knowledge of your current situation, of where you're at. I'll mention just very briefly a few of the examples of research that has been done elsewhere in the quest for a greater understanding of where we're at. We know that the language used to describe the work of women is different than the language used to describe the work of men. There are many examples from the research literature. One kind of fun example is from a site in the United States called Rate My Professor, where students can submit evaluations of their teachers. And there's now a web page that you can visit where you're allowed to type in words to see how often they're used to describe male professors or to describe female professors. In fact, it's broken down by field, so you can do those comparisons also. So words like genius, brilliant, excellent are in all fields used much more to describe male professors than female professors. Words like warm and helpful, not to mention bossy, are used much more to describe female professors than male professors. You might take some comfort in knowing that words like hot or sexy are used equally for both men and women. The language used to evaluate the work of women is important for knowing where we're at. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, is familiar with the concept of implicit bias and the growing body of literature that's been done on that topic. Implicit bias, as you know, refers to attitudes that we have, often which we don't even know about. There is a vast literature. I mentioned one simple example of some work that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science last year, where a simulation was done in which people were going to be hired to perform a job that required strong math skills. Without going into the details of the methodology here, one of the most interesting results of that study is that when hiring mistakes were made, that is to say, when a person with weaker math skills was hired and one failed to hire a person with stronger math skills, 90% of those mistaken hirings went to the benefit of men. 90% of the time, a mistaken hiring was hiring a weaker man over a stronger woman. There's an opportunity for the Research Council of Korea to show real leadership in the Asia-Pacific region by funding replications of this kind of research in the Korean context as part of the work that needs to be done to know where you're at. Once you know where you're at, once you understand that there is a problem, once you understand that quality is being compromised, then we have to think about where we want to get to. We have to know why this is a problem for science, why it's important to increase diversity in STEM fields. At the gender summits, we often focus on the benefits to the workplace and to society, and many of these have been touched upon by our speakers yesterday, so I won't repeat the arguments here, but they range from things like the influence of diversity on greater group intelligence, to increased reliability in decision-making processes when there's diversity in the group. And perhaps even one of the benefits is the increased likelihood of cross-disciplinary research if the explorations currently being carried out by Elsevier pan out, which we'll hear about at the Gender Summit in November, I'm told. Or even to the positive effect of diversity in management teams on the job satisfaction of employees, which is particularly important when we add to it the observation that job satisfaction increases productivity. So there are many reasons to think that the skewed situation in STEM fields today is problematic, that quality is being compromised. And again, we should not base ourselves on stories, but rather on solid research. And much of this research is probably culturally dependent, so it will be important to fund that research so that it can be replicated here. Well, once we know the facts, and once we've answered for ourselves the question why, once we believe that it's a problem, then we're ready for actions to be taken. And what kinds of actions might be important? Some of them can be very simple, some of them can be quite complex. I write about these things quite a bit, and as soon as I finish my talk here, I'll tweet links to articles describing all of these examples. I'm going to give you 4 brief examples. One example of an extremely mild measure comes from the Research Council of Norway. The Research Council of Norway in 2002 started a program to create centers of excellence. The first cohort of directors of centers, which I had the privilege to be a part of, consisted of 13 men and 0 women. The Research Council considered this to be a problem and worked hard to find ways to address it. And they took a very, very simple measure. What they did the next time that they advertised for the opportunity to create centers of excellence is that they wrote in the call that we think it's important that also women are considered when universities advance applications for centers of excellence. It wasn't part of the evaluation, it wasn't counted, you didn't get points for having a woman there. It simply said, we think it's important. And of course, universities want to get these centers, so they started thinking about that too, and the percentage went up. And in the third cohort, which was just announced 2 years ago, there were about 25% women directors, which matches the percentage of women full professors in Norway. And while we might wish that there were more women full professors, at least it's progress when there's concord between those 2 groups. So that simple measure, simply pointing it out, can make a difference. A second example comes from my own experience when I was the vice rector at the University of Tromsø, where I initiated a project we called the Promotion Project that gave special attention to women who were associate professors on their way to becoming full professors. That university 10 years ago was the worst university in Norway, having fewer than 10% women as full professors, and today it's the best university in Norway, having over 30%. That project consisted of simulating, among other things, the promotion experience, mocking the promotion experience so that women had a better understanding of what they might be going into, and so that they would get feedback telling them where they were. That feedback then led to a process with their chairs, a career planning process. And that's an example of something where when we make an investment in women, it turns out to be good for everyone, because those chairmen of the chairs of their departments previously had not had training in doing career planning with their staff members. And they were given training in the context of this project, and then they applied that, many of them told me, with all of the people in their department. So investing in women can genuinely be a decision that leads to improving the situation for everyone. The third example I'd like to give you is also from Norway. It's related to the admission process for students. We have an elaborate system whereby students get points for everything from their age to their performance in high school when they're applying to certain studies at the university. And we now have a system whereby in fields of study that are skewed strongly either with an abundance of male students or an abundance of female students, that we give extra points to the underrepresented sex. So we have a long track record now of doing this in engineering fields, where we give extra points to young women simply on the basis of their sex. This kind of affirmative action measure sends a strong signal to women that they are wanted in these fields, and it has had a tremendous effect. In fact, some of those programs are now being rolled back because the workforce, we have a requirement that when the workforce reaches 35% of the underrepresented sex, then we don't any longer do that affirmative action program, and we have in fact achieved that in some fields. And the fourth and final example I want to give you is the strongest measure that we can imagine, namely quotas. And at the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, they did a project where they announced 10 special research professorships only for women. They had tried many different measures for recruiting women. They had not gotten where they wanted to get. They decided to try this very strong measure. Needless to say, there were some legal challenges to that, but they were able to prevail in those contexts because of the previous attempts and their failure, and because of arguments about the benefits of diversity in those kinds of contexts. So in my work now, both at my own institution and in my role as the head of the Committee on Gender Balance and Diversity in Research, I find these kinds of examples to provide the inspiration that we need for further policy initiatives. The role of my committee is to give advice to the government and advice to the member institutions about ways that they might act to change the current situation. The very most important thing for all of us to remember and to tell policymakers is that this problem is self-perpetuating. Declining populations, poor relative performance by boys in schools, not even the well-documented longitudinal improvement in math skills for women that outpaces the improvement for men. None of these give any basis for believing that this problem will just solve itself. It will not, and there are compelling evidence-based reasons to maintain that position. This will not go away by itself. Actions and interventions are required, and the time for that is now. Thank you.